today, just so you guys know, you'll get a message on your screen if you can just click got it. But we are going to be talking about death. And it's a topic, honestly, if you guys know me, you've heard me talk a lot about death, and it's, it's something that we're all going to go through, and how you think of it is really important. And it can create a lot of stress for a lot of you, and it can also be a time that actually can be quite beautiful. So today we have a couple of experts, Shanti, Vani, and Anna Schwait. They are death doulas, and we're going to talk about what a death doula does. We have a whole range of topics. As you have questions, there is a Q&A. Please feel free to put your question, type it out and send it in. And as we have time, even during the webinar today, we may take your questions if it helps guide the discussion. All right, so let's get started. Shanti, if I could start with you, and just if you could just tell us a little bit about yourself and your experience, and what brought you to this particular type of work.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, I found myself at the age of 57, never having really gone to college or having a degree. I had raised my kids as a single mom and gone through a lot of challenges in life. And so I went to respiratory school, and I worked at a hospital for 11 years as a respiratory therapist. But my job there in the ER and the ICU was often very painful because I was at work. I had to participate in CPR and life-prolonging procedures, ventilators, people that were being kept alive. And it was really against my my hippie ways, my nature girl inclinations. But I did it, because I wanted to help people breathe. And so during that time, from 2008 to 2020, from 2013 to 2018, we had 7 deaths in my family in those 5 years, one on top of the other. And so I was working nights in the hospital and then coming home and trying to cope with everything. And so then my daughter, she died with addiction and depression. So she died in 2015 in February. And at that point, we were just getting to where we had to move in with my mom. So a little later that year, I had to move in with my mother with Alzheimer's and take care of her. So while I was caring for mom, I had some quiet time as well because my daughter was helping me. And I was hearing something, I guess, on NPR or an article somewhere about end-of-life doula, and it immediately perked my ear up because I'd had so much experience and pain carrying these deaths alone with nowhere to turn and not knowing what to do. So, I saw the healthcare system and the hospice system as part of that. And so as soon as mom died that same year, I went and got my training in New York City with ANELDA. And so that was 2018. And then my niche became grief as my main niche, but I also do work as a doula sometimes. So.
And what is your training as a doula? Like, what does that entail?
Well, there are a variety of types of trainings. The one I did with ANELDA, the International End-of-Life Doula Association, was a weekend. It was from a Friday night to a Sunday afternoon. And for me, it was very good. It was touching on a whole lot of topics, and educating us and giving us tools, things like, creative visualization, calming techniques. So it touched on a lot of things. And then it left me to research for myself, which things I wanted to go deeper into.
And how long have you been doing it now?
Well, it started slow, but 6 years.
Okay. All right. Mm-hmm. Anna, we want to hear from you. Same types of questions. And I wonder if you could also touch a little bit on, what you do. What do you do as a death doula?
Oh boy. Well, it's a big topic. it's a passion and a calling, I would say, for me. Because I remember being a young girl, and I grew up in a Puerto Rican neighborhood, and the grandmothers would all take care of everybody. And if someone was dying, and I remember several grandmothers who died at home, and we took care of them, and the kids played. I didn't take care of them. I played with the kids, but I could see what was happening. And then I moved on and went to nursing school, and at South Miami Hospital, I was the nurse I noticed that wanted to work with the people who were dying. We were an oncology unit, and the nurses were scared. I think it was scared or maybe uncomfortable, or somehow or another felt inadequate with it. And I took over that caseload and had photos of with patients, and that was back in 1983. So you can see that I go back a long time doing this. Like Vani says, it's something that's in us that stirs us to want to pick up to do this, what some people think is most unusual work, but for me it's just another part of the aspect of life work. And what I do is help people prepare. I help people feel comfortable with what's coming. I don't want to dwell on it. I don't want to focus on it. I don't want to be this doomsdayer. I want to take care of the business that needs to be handled on a lot of different levels. But we do that, and it's very rewarding work.
You know, on that, I mean, I in my work in the life care planning field, we have seen this problem where the clients come to us. One of the family members is suffering from a chronic illness, and it's terminal. You know, it can be Parkinson's, it can be dementia, it can be cancer. And what we see is this kind of healthcare crisis where our loved one who's ill really needs a lot of support from a healthcare perspective. And so, you know, we see the family members, in particular spouses, become a kind of absorbed into a caregiver role. And as we move closer to the death event, I know this happened with my own mother. She had pancreatic cancer. And I found my dad, my sister, and I were like, when is the next injection to keep her from getting blood clots? Like, we have to change the feeding tube. We need to do. And we got so focused on the caregiving aspects that, you know, to some extent, but for hospice, reminding us, you know, remember this time is precious, and this is our time to kind of enjoy our roles as spouses and as daughter, and to treasure. I know one of my friends was like, make sure you keep some t-shirts of your mom, and so you can smell her after she's gone. You know, it sounds kind of creepy, but I did that and I loved it. It happened for like 2 years. I kept her t-shirts. And it was so precious to me to have known that that was something important to do.
Yes.
Yeah. And
That's
so
that preparation that you have, that you know it's coming. We're not going to play or deny or get caught up in that. Yeah, we know it's coming. I know mine's coming.
yeah.
I want to be ready. I don't want to be fearful or denying or, you know, avoiding. And I know why we do. I mean, I understand it. As a culture, we've kind of, we have a lot of specialties. We have a lot of doctors. We have a lot of providers. The information is overwhelming. Talk about all of this thing. And the doctors themselves are having a struggle with connecting soul to soul, if you will, with that patient, to let them know that there's nothing else that can be medically done. That seems like such a defeating place.
Yes.
Yeah, and
they're supposed to be doing no harm, right? They're supposed to be able to heal you.
Yeah, but that doesn't mean keep the body alive at all costs. Harm can be doing just that. And so I think, yeah, there's two things I wanted to say about that. I'll try to remember the second one. But my father-in-law was dying in North Florida just less than 2 years ago. And you know, he was taken into a room, and, you know, he was just kind of there. And then his oxygen level was 83 and his heart rate was 40. And they came running into, well, I actually arrived to visit him and mentioned what's his, you know, what's his status. And they they came running in and they sent the cardiologist and they were going to do, I don't know, whatever they do, put in a pacemaker or, but I said, oh no, it's fine. And he's dying. And the nice young cardiologist, the woman, just was in tears. She was so grateful, that someone could accept and allow this natural process. And then the other thing I want to say is that even we who are not on hospice and not with terminal cancer, we need to live that same way of not worrying so much about all the material stuff, but make sure we attend to our emotional and spiritual needs, because it's just so easy in life just to kind of run the rat race and get so busy with this and that, and miss parts that we would then regret if one of us were to die. And I tell my hospice patient that, who knows, I could die before you, So we're all in this boat together, and we're all the same, we're just in this together.
Yeah. So when is it that someone might think about bringing, a death doula on? At what stage do you normally get hired, and what stage would you prefer to become part of this journey?
Well, I could speak to me that usually when I get hired is pretty late in the game, because there's a lot of resistance still to accepting this. So I'm so grateful for this opportunity to kind of demystify this process, that we can get together and we can say, these are the areas that I want to cover. And we can talk about how you want to die, where do you want to be, how do you want it to look, and start to take control of that setting. We can talk about the emotional component. Are there loose ends? Are there things that people that you need to forgive, to say I love you, to say thank you, to say I forgive you, and to just kind of release those burdens? Isn't that powerful?
Yes.
And then the place to be able to say, how did I live my life? To look with introspection. This is the frame, the age category that we're in, as we look back at our life and say, what did I generate in my life? What is my level of integrity? What do I leave in my legacy? How do I want to be remembered? And then the last component, and for me, it's important, but I honor everyone where they're at, because some people don't have a spiritual or religious belief. But that if there is something that I can do to support right at that last transition, let's do that. Let's get that plan in place.
And what if, like, I know some of our clients, and my mom in particular, she did not want to die. She was like, she did chemotherapy 48 hours before she died. And her wish was to keep trying to stay alive. And we kind of honored that. That was how she wanted to do this. So is that common, that lack of acceptance? And how do you guys deal with that? Because I do have a lot of clients who don't want to talk about death. They don't, it's kind of like we're twisting their arm to get a living will and a designation of healthcare surrogate because they want to stay in charge. And it can be very challenging, but like, what if that is what you guys are experiencing when you meet with your person?
Well, I think that the kind of what we call deep active listening that we do allows them to, without interruption, without judgment or advice or criticism, allows them to talk about stuff and process it. And oftentimes I just lend my own experience to the conversation, or others that I've seen, just mentioning, wow, this happened, and man, it was so rough because the daughter this or the wife that, or sometimes you have the patient is willing to go, and then the spouse is absolutely fighting it. One of my friends has a job to be talking about, in Florida, sometimes people choose to stop eating and drinking. It's called Voluntarily Stop Eating and Drinking, we said. And we're going to be, the Florida End of Life Doula Alliance is going to be doing a a Zoom meeting that'll be open on that for people to learn about it. And so the wife is against it, but the client wants to do that, and it can be very arduous and difficult. But our first priority is to advocate for the client, for the patient. And sometimes we run into a lot of chaos in the family, a lot of disagreement. The patient gets interrupted and can't even speak their mind. And so we sometimes have to, as gently as possible or directly as possible, to guide the conversation towards, well, looking at them and saying, well, but what do you want? This is your life. This is your next however much time you have. And the thing too I found about power of attorney is some people are under the impression, not that the lawyers haven't taught them or told them or whoever helped them get that document, they're under the impression I have the power of attorney. But the point is that's only if the person is deemed unable, right, to make decisions for themselves. And so it's,
well, let me jump in on that.
Okay, go
Give
ahead.
the little lawyer.
Okay, help me.
Here. So there is a durable power of attorney for healthcare decision-making that is still found in Florida statutes, but we've really moved to a designation of healthcare surrogate as the primary decision-making document. And eventually we know that the DPOA for healthcare is going to drop off. So we're really moving people towards the healthcare surrogate statute instead of the DPOA for healthcare decision-making. Now with that, there is actually, since 2017, there was a change in the law for designations of healthcare surrogate that allow you to, even if you can make decisions for yourself. So that's exactly what you're talking about, Vani, is, even when we can make decisions for ourselves, you can have someone else make a decision for you if you put your initials in that provision that's included in the statutory definition of healthcare surrogate. So you can designate someone to make decisions for you. It's an extra step. It requires a separate enumeration, so a separate initialization, but you can do that. So, to your point, in most cases, it's still, if you say like, I've put my initials in that box, I want this person to make decisions for me, but then you say, you know what, I don't really want that right now. It still is yours to make. So if you are not incapacitated, but you defer to someone else, like I know for my mom, I wish we had that provision when she was going through her death event, because she didn't want to go to make medical decisions. She wanted to stay and play Barbies with her granddaughters on the bed, so it creates an avenue for people that are really sick to not go to the doctor's office to do informed consent there. Instead, they can send their healthcare decision maker. Even if they have capacity to do it, they're not required to anymore if they put their initials in that little box and sign that provision. But to your point, yes, you still have ultimate authority if that is your wish.
And you have a right to change your mind.
Of course.
So, but I think that, go ahead. Well, I was just gonna say, I think the challenge is when there's family patterns that have, bullying or, disconnect. So who your person is tremendously important. And you might have made your documents a few years ago, and then the person started having fits or control issues or whatever, and then you're in it, and you also can change those documents accordingly. So part of our job would be, and when you talk about how early do we start, I think part of our job is to get people to start very early and just documents. Let's see what you got, to help them look at it, because they say, oh yeah, they're in the closet, they've been there for 5 years, I know. But have you reviewed them with your person? And is that really who you want? Because they might say, well, my oldest child, but then it turns out that your oldest child is not the best person, so, and it doesn't have to be family, right? It could be.
Yeah, I'll just jump in really quick. I used to teach the ethics part of the end of life nurses conference. It was every year, and it was PA ICU nurses, it was Shan's ICU nurses, and it was hospice nurses. And what I found at the very beginning of teaching that, because I would ask, how many of you have given the final dose? And no one raised their hands. And then like about 5 years after that, everyone raised their hand. And now when I say, 100 or more times, like everyone raises their hand. So we are seeing this transition towards alleviation of suffering that sometimes results in a death event. And the other thing that I asked them was, who are the best decision makers when it comes to healthcare decision making? And they say the worst decision maker is a parent for a child.
Mm.
And I've seen that. I'm sure you guys have seen that too. They will keep that child alive. We had one and it was terrible, but she stayed alive for 10 years because her mother was the healthcare decision maker. And then the other bad healthcare decision maker, believe it or not, from these nurses who deal with this daily, and you guys have, was spouses. Spouses are not great either. They said the best two decision makers are siblings and friend/neighbor. You know, and whether that's still true, I don't know. It's been a few years since I taught at that conference, but I'd love to hear you guys, what you guys think. I mean, you hate to stereotype because it's so individual with each situation, but I mean, traditionally, what are your guys' thoughts about that? Are there better decision makers than other when it comes to really these hard end of life decision-making events?
I haven't really had too much of an issue with who's making the decisions and if their wishes are being followed through. The person's wanting to stick to therapy, chemotherapy. I had that experience with my own sister who was way beyond having to, her liver had stopped functioning and it was just awful to watch, but she didn't want to give up. And so that hope kept her going and kept her interacting. And so I supported that. And then there was when she knew that she couldn't get up anymore. See, there's changes. And this is the teaching that I like to teach. There's changes that start to happen. We start to see what the body starts to do when it begins to shut down. And at that point, I said to her, I can get you into a very nice hospice setting. Very nice. And she said, let's do it. She was ready at that point. I couldn't push it a day before. Months she struggled. And so we want to meet them where they're at to provide options. But if there's fear and if there's whatever is there, we still stay the course and provide whatever support and education we can.
Yeah, and I had an experience with someone who, you know, my first check-in is like, for how are you feeling? You know, are you at ease? What's your situation? And they had recently been put on hospice after a whirlwind few months of difficult and shocking events, you know, and so the home situation dropped off from you know, from rehab to home now on hospice and not having enough care and support there. And so it's kind of like if you're starving, it's really hard to meditate, you know, to have the luxury and the emotional space. And if you don't know who's going to come and care for you, or if you will have the money or, you know, anything, then you can't really begin to do the doula work because there's too much worrying about survival. And so all you can talk about is this going to happen? Is that going to happen? And it's very stressful. So it can be very challenging setting the person up in a comforting environment, getting some wrinkles, you know, ironed out of the situation. And families can be very complicated. But you know, all we can do is do our best. And you know, we can't force and change people. You know, we just have to bring in our calm and our information and our good wish for everyone. In spite of their behavior, still wishing for peace and comfort and ease for everyone. And so it's challenging. And sometimes I think, boy, I do need to schedule my my time off and do more for self-care because it's a lot sometimes.
Yeah. And just coming back to something that we talked about earlier, getting people out of a caregiving role at some point on this journey becomes really important for that especially the end part, because it can be such a distraction that it takes you out of the present moment of enjoying that time together. And you guys know, like, there does seem to be this kind of almost like our person comes back for this kind of sharp period at some point before the death event that can be so powerful, and you want to be there with them. So if you're worried about when is the next medication dose, you know, it can take you away, and you can miss some of those really powerful, you know, moments of connection. And so, yeah. All right. We have some questions. I'm just gonna go through a couple of them to start, and then actually I'm gonna hit on someone anonymous asked. They said, have any of the panel read Julie McFadden's Nothing to Fear? This seminar echoes many of the ideas and sentiments in that book. If you've read it, do you find it valuable? I don't think any of us have read it, but the next question was, do you have any other recommended readings for the audience? And I will tell you guys, you haven't read this book, which is Atul Gawande's Being Mortal. It's fantastic. And if you ever get a chance to hear him speak, he is a medical doctor, and he is really kind of reinforcing a lot of the things that we're talking about here, which is, you know, what is important to you at the end of life, and then dial into that. And I see Vani kind of reaching for another book. I don't know, Anna, do you have any suggested readings that you might want to share?
I like this Care of the Dying, but for myself personally, I liked reading The Wild Edge of Sorrow by Francis Weller. He goes through all of the times in our life that we experience this deep connection to pain and loss, but the awakening more of becoming who we are. And I think that piece on the caregiver, having to become a nurse, really is really valuable to touch on, because that is a very strong reality and most dynamic. The name of the book, Vani, that you had?
Is Caring for the Dying, the Doula Approach to a Meaningful Death by Henry Frisco Weiss. And Henry is the founder of the International End of Life Doula Association, where I trained. And then he's in his own practice now up in the Northeast of the United States. So that's for the doula stuff. That's one good one. I have many books, so many books, more than I've ever had in my life.
I remember
books, my favorite.
when I started in nursing, we had somebody called Elizabeth Kubler-Ross giving us these guidelines, you know, and it was mind blowing. And now you do a search and you have millions, but I think we need to make it applicable. We need to put it into someone's life so that it makes a difference, so that it's a sustainable work, you know, and that we can teach that husband or wife how to take some time every day for them to connect with who they are. Because the way I see it is that we honor death by honoring life. You can't exclude one. You have to live well to die well, or you want to live well to die well. And so we just set this pattern in motion of what brings you joy, what brings you peace, what things allow you to leave stress behind. And the list that the couples and the families come up with is beautiful, and then they implement it.
Yeah, and I wanted to say another book that there's two books by Megan Devine. I always use her little video, How Do You Help a Grieving Friend? Her business is called Refuge in Grief, and I did my best grief training with her. It was a 6-month program certificate. But her books are called It's Okay That You're Not Okay. And then she has a journal that's a very interactive journal, How to Carry What Can't Be Fixed is the title of that one. And so sometimes when I do a class on Zoom, I'll make sure everyone has at least one of her books. It's Okay That You're Not Okay.
Yeah. Okay, back to our questions, because I don't want to miss any of these, and more keep being added. So one of the questions, which I'll just tackle it, is making a video of the client legal in the state of Florida for the children so that they know the current wishes of the client. And, you know, with the consent of the person that you're videotaping, sure, you can make a video. Absolutely. Obviously, you know, when we go back to the law on medical decision-making, and I hate to do the lawyer thing, but I'm going to, so the healthcare surrogate decision maker in Florida is the legal decision maker when a person cannot make a decision for themselves. So if you have someone who no longer make informed consent, that means weighing the risks and benefits of a procedure, the legal decision maker is the designated healthcare surrogate or the agent under power of attorney for medical decision making, if they have that instead. Now, if that person's wishes have been well established by a video from 2 years ago or 2 days ago, the legal decision maker is still the designated healthcare surrogate. So, that may feel like, no, if they're saying on a video that they want X, Y, and Z, that should prevail, but it doesn't, not in Florida. The legal decision maker is the designated healthcare surrogate. So, we do have some legislation that's going to be pending this year called, it's actually called PDDO, patient directed, I forget, orders, but basically it follows something called POST, which is in play in California and other places out west, where basically a patient and a doctor have certain discussions and then they create doctor's orders to be implemented. And that's where, the direct patient decision is implemented without the use of a healthcare surrogate to be that intermediary. We have not adopted that in Florida. New Jersey and New York have something similar to what's being proposed here. The elder law section supports this legislation so far because, of course, we want patients, wishes to be honored. So we're going to see where that goes. But right now, it is the decision of the designated healthcare surrogate that will be the legal decision.
So Shannon, maybe you could let us know how we can help. I didn't know about that, but how we can help speak out on that.
Yeah, we'll be sending out newsletters and educating on legislation that's coming up.
I don't think it trumps the DNR, does it?
No. And a DNR is a physician's order. So that would be a decision between the patient. And sometimes it's with the healthcare surrogate. But yeah, it's signed by the doctor. It's on that yellow
And
form.
this is the thing on the DNR, that when we talk about horrible experiences, my worst has been that they didn't have the DNR on the refrigerator. That was the worst.
Yeah, and same here in the
and
ER.
They get
at the hospital.
resuscitated. Can you guys explain what happens when someone who's really fragile? I mean, it's unfortunate, but the death event can be very traumatic.
Well, yes, I can speak to that because when I worked in Lake City Medical Center, a woman came in, my mother had died. And this woman came in and she looked just like mom. She had about 90 pounds, about 90 years old. She had nothing on but her Depends, and they were crunching her ribs, just violently, really. Sometimes not that case particularly, but it feels like a sexual assault. I'm sorry to say that, but there's some ugly stuff that we do. I'm just willing to talk about. And so I was, as a respiratory therapist, I was at the head of the bed giving the oxygen. That was my job. I was, I felt like a mercenary soldier or something, being paid to do this. But I looked at a chair down by the door of the ER room, and so the doctor and I were at the head, and then all the EMTs and nurses were doing the CPR. And I saw a man sitting on a chair, and I left my post. I had someone else do the bagging, and I went and I said, "Are you the husband?" And he said, "Yes." He was just terrified, and powerless. And I said, "Well, do you know what she wanted?" And he said, "She didn't want extreme measures." And I said, "Well, do you know that that's extreme measures?" And he said, "Yeah," but he didn't know what to do. So I went and told the doctor that. I took my post back at the head of the bed and told the doctor that, and they still went on a few minutes, and then they gave up. They stopped. But sorry about that. But it was so painful for everyone. And sometimes the nurses and people will just do it gently. They won't even really do the big effort because they know. But it's just, anyway, it's so hard.
Anna?
No, it's just that it's very difficult, but I think that's where we have this wonderful opportunity, to stay prepared, to plan, to maybe it's okay to take control and say, hey, I want to do it this way. This is what I want. Let me talk to people who will help me. Let's create a plan here and let's put it away and then get on with the great work of being alive and doing what we can, enjoying our family, enjoying those things that are valuable. But knowing another worst scenario is when an unexpected death at 93. I don't know what they were expecting, but the death was unexpected and there was chaos, painful, awful. I don't want to minimize this is horrible pain. And in the midst of grief, you have to plan and you have to get active fast. And I thought, I don't want to have that happen to people that I work with. Let's be ready. Let's be ready. And let's do it how we want to do it.
Yeah.
It's a thought.
I love it. And, you know, one of the other questions that is in the chat is, where would we locate the forms for these kinds of decisions? So the designation of healthcare surrogate and the living will, which is really, so the healthcare surrogate designates who you want to make medical decisions if you're unable, or if you just don't feel like making those decisions like we just talked about. The living will is really the toolbox for end of life. So it addresses terminal condition, end stage condition, and persistent vegetative state, all those three conditions. And it also should address whether you want artificial hydration and nutrition withdrawn, or the ability for that decision maker to withdraw artificial hydration or nutrition. And those forms, so the designation of healthcare surrogate and the living will, you can actually download them from our website, which is the millerelderlawfirm.com. You go to links and we have those forms available to the general public. We don't charge a fee for that. So feel free to download them, but be careful, read through it. And you can only designate one person to make medical decisions for you at a time. So some people will put two people in. That doesn't work, because if you don't agree, then it doesn't work. But the statute requires one individual person to be the decision maker.
But then can't you have the one, if that one does not want to or cannot, then the second one would?
Yes. It's like a
Okay,
standby.
so you couldn't have two on there.
Yeah, you could have three, you know, and the key is phone numbers, because doctors are going to call. They're not going to send a letter.
Yeah,
phone
number.
Yeah. And I like to tell people, have your healthcare decision-making documents somewhere that you can find them. Email them to yourself so you can download them at the hospital. Also, and a copy is just as good as the original. I also tell people, put a copy in your glove compartment. Just make a copy, put it there.
That's right.
You know, and that way you always have it. But email it.
Question, then where does, what about organ transplant? Does that go onto the living will paper? Where does that go?
It should be on your driver's license.
Yeah.
It's really good to designate on your driver's license. There are also organ designation forms that you can include, and your healthcare decision maker can do that decision making for you as well. Interesting. Your healthcare decision maker is also the person who gets responsibility for managing your body after you die. So a lot of people think, oh, you know, it's going to be my personal representative or my spouse or whatever. No, it's your designated healthcare decision maker is the one who has the priority decision making of what to do with your body when you die.
So one thing, oh, go ahead. Sorry.
No, go ahead.
Well, one thing I found helpful when a patient is having trouble making decisions is just to sit there with them alone without interruption and just make a list of pros and cons. You know, pros and cons for them to themselves think about the different scenarios. And then if there are parts of their list that they don't really understand about, then we can explain it to them. And just kind of, and then what I do is I do it on a big piece of paper with a black magic marker, and I go home and I type it into a file, which I can then share with their person or themselves. Put it in their folder, you know, and it's a very useful. So,
you know,
okay.
Another aspect of the doula work too is that we can initiate difficult conversations. I want to say that because this topic is comfortable between the three of us. We can talk all day, I believe. But the thing is that it's difficult and it's extremely painful. And in some ways, we've never done that. We don't talk about death. And so to have someone come in, you know, I've been called in to say, will you tell my sister that I'm dying? And that's difficult, but I do initiate and engage with everyone to say, let's talk about this and see how we can make a better place of acceptance for this topic in our life. So thank you.
I love that. So one thing that I definitely want to hit on, and I know we're getting close to the end of our time, but hospice. And so, you know, we have this thing about hospice, like with my own mother, she was so resistant to bringing hospice in. But from your perspectives, when is it time to start thinking about a hospice consult? When should we start to think about bringing hospice in?
Well, again, I think it goes to not being educated, not knowing, because a lot of times I had a patient tell me, no, I don't want to go to hospice. That's an assisted dying facility. Whoa.
We don't have that here.
Assisted living, assisted dying. So there's that fear. You go to hospice, you're going to die. And you know what? That's the truth.
Yeah.
So
we
have to be at peace with that. With when are you at terms of your body? Only the person knows the pain level, the loss of function, the loss of ability to navigate in their home. When the body starts to decline and starts to shut down, the person knows that the decline is coming. If they're still aggressively trying to fight the disease process, then they're not a good hospice candidate. You have to be at a place of surrendering and just doing what the body needs to do to live its best life all the way to the end. But there has to be that agreement with the individual that the time has come to stop the aggressive treatments and focus now on this phase of life.
Yeah, and sometimes it takes the doctors telling you, because then you're like, I got the news, you know. But also letting your doctor know that you're willing to hear honestly from them what they think. Because I'm sure doctors are in a position of having to just be really ginger about it and, you know, careful. And but also I think some of the hospices, I don't know if all of them have it, but there's a pre-hospice status where
palliative care.
Yeah, but I think it's something else. Well, maybe that's what they call it. But just getting on as a potential patient with them, and they get to know them, and they help you adjust.
And really what we know about hospice is that, you know, the assessment that will take place is really, are you within 6 months of death? And so that's the assessment that they make. And a lot of people don't realize that, you know, you could have a CNA from hospice who comes and checks on you, you know, once a week or twice a week, helps you with a shower. There's volunteers who can come and read to you, you know, just entertain you, like be a person in your life. Like hospice can be not moving to Haven Hospice House, right? Which can be a place where people will go to die. And honestly, it's one of the most beautiful places to die. My grandmother died there. My mom died at home. But if I'm gonna die, like I want to go there because they have
absolutely. That's the education we have to get out. That hospice is a wonderful service available to us in our community, and that we have to take full advantage of it because they've got a great team of people that'll help us. And when I work with a hospice team, it's phenomenal. They bring in what we need. I advocate for this or that. They really are very, very helpful and present. And then we're busy over here saying, well, what do you want to leave for your grandchildren? And how do you want to be remembered? And what is the spiritual practice that I can focus on while you're in your transition? And leave that piece, that medical work to them. And we focus on this other component of life.
Yes, I have a document called the ethical will, where it just explores your values and what's important to you. And things can come out of that no one ever knew. And if you go through that ethical will checklist and you record it, you'll get stories that even after the person dies, that people can see or before. But so also I've heard people ask, well, they're looking for assisted living, and then they'll think that hospice is an option. I'm like, oh no, they'll come to wherever you are, very lovely, but and then when your symptoms are beyond management and you're writhing and crying and you're, then hopefully they'll have a space for you there. And it is a wonderful way to relieve your suffering. And I think relieving suffering is our mission, really, if you want to put it very simply.
Yeah. And, we have so many clients who are in residential facilities, either a nursing home level of care or assisted living, who have terminal, and they have hospice, and hospice can be a second set of eyes. So, something may be going on, and that hospice nurse makes their rounds and lets our healthcare decision maker know, hey, this person's got a stage 2 bed sore in this facility. And it can be really helpful to have hospice on board, just because they can sometimes see things that facility may not see or report to you.
I do want to say we had my father-in-law at the Windsor in Gainesville, and if you were to have the price that you would pay to have sort of the agency come in for 8 hours a day, it's the same as 24 as living at the Windsor. I mean, it's incredible. You'd think, oh, we can't afford that, but what we can't afford is having only 8 hours a day of care, and then things go downhill and the person's alone for 16 hours of the day. So there's just a lot of really interesting things.
So a couple more questions I want to just hit on. One is, does 5 wishes work well as a living will? And the answer to that is, it's great. It is a great document that gives really a whole bunch of scenarios, and it's very thorough. The problem that I have seen is that when a physician gets it, they they want the 2-page statutory, living will, because it's going to tell them very succinctly what you want. If it's a terminal condition, if it's an end stage condition, if it's a persistent vegetative state, you have artificial hydration and nutrition. So, that can be helpful, but do both. You can do both at the same time. And the doctor can then pull that one that he wants or she wants and get a good idea of what it is that they need to do legally. But it can help you to understand, and it can help your healthcare surrogate to make that decision. Final question. The designated healthcare decision maker makes decisions for their person, but they can't change the plans of said person, can they? Well, my friend, unfortunately, until we get PDDO, which would be an order, yeah, they can. They can. And sadly, we have seen that happen, where the designated healthcare decision maker makes a decision differently than what our principal person would want. It still doesn't feel right for many of us, but that is the reality of our laws today. So that is why you're seeing things like POST and PDDO out there, is because we have seen scenarios where that does happen. Okay. That, I think, if there's any other last words, any things that you guys want to share, we're really over time, but I'd love to just hear final comments on things, or, anything that we didn't hit on that you guys would like to share.
No, just that it can be a scary, overwhelming, frightening, and just stressful time in life, with a lot coming at you fast and a lot changing even faster. And it helps to have support. It helps to have guidance, and it helps to be prepared. I've experienced it for myself in various scenarios most of my life, and I see the benefits of it. So I would encourage, reach out and get some help.
And I think what I would say is, one of our biggest blocks is fear of feelings. Feelings are just feelings. You're not gonna never stop crying. You're not gonna break. They say, oh, I feel like I'll never stop. Just let it rip, and it'll stop. Let nature take its course. So I think just the fear of emotion is kind of huge. Especially for men, I will say, but still all of us. Fear not.
Yeah, the grief. Oh my gosh, the grief. And it's I know. I think one of the things that we often tell spouses is you can't manage it. It's gonna come when it comes. And unfortunately, we see a lot of people, that spouse that's left behind after a long-term marriage, they start making these decisions like right away, or they get remarried right away, or they want to move to another state, or, you know, and it's like, as much as I can, I'm like, just wait, just give it a year. And we also know there's a 50% increase in deaths of longtime spouses in that first year after the death of the first spouse. So taking care of yourself, doing self-care, you know, getting sleep, there's a sense of guilt that kind of lingers with that spouse that's left behind, because they feel relief when they've been caring for somebody 24/7, and now that person is gone, and you feel this kind of sense of relief that you don't have to do the caregiving anymore. And that can feel super guilt ridden, and, you know, I can't believe I feel happy that this person is gone, but all that's normal. And it's just like you said, Vani, I mean, these feelings are going to come, and it doesn't mean that they're going to stay forever. And it doesn't necessarily even mean that they're real.
Yeah, and then that guilt and regret can also be because you treated them not quite as nicely as you might have, because you were stressed and you didn't have the support. So we love what we do, huh, Anna? And Shannon.
Yeah, we have a
Let's
great,
go forward, no
crew.
regrets. Let's live a life, see if we can do it.
Yeah.
So can I put in a little pitch for Florida End of Life Doula Alliance website?
Of
It's
course.
FEOLDA.org. We're a nonprofit now. So,
And if you'd like more information, you could go also to compassionatecarenow.com. That's my website. And there's information on services that all of us end of life doulas do, and the work that Vani does. Do you have a website? Or
yes, shantivani.com. That's pretty easy. Yeah. Yeah. Thank you.
All right. Well, thanks to both of you for agreeing to come on, and I want you back, so don't go too far away. We love talking about death. You guys know that about us. So we definitely want to pick your brains more. So thank you so much for joining us today.
very special.
Thank you so much. It's been a pleasure. Yeah.
Thanks. Oh, lots of thank yous in the question and answer too. Lots of people saying this was powerful. We can't wait to see the video. You know, lots. Grief, a lot of really nice things said about all of you. All right.
Can we, is there a way for us to copy it or get the Q&A?
Yeah, I'll be happy to make it.
Okay, that'd be fun because I haven't seen it at all throughout. So that's great.
I'll do it right now.
Oh, yeah. I mean, we could do it once a month. I'd be happy. We'll just activate more questions. Anyway, great.
Picture of these, so I can send that to you guys.
So,
and lots of questions about the books.
Uh-huh.
All right, one more. There we go.
Oh yeah, it's not that long, is it? Yeah, that's okay.
Excited to be part of this community. I see you, Leslie. All right, you guys. Oh, and yes, and May said she can share the questions after. All right.
Oh, thanks so much. This has been lovely. We'll be in touch.
Okay.
Okay.